Hey, everybody. Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. I'm your host, Roman Zelichenko, founder of Laborless, an immigration tech company that automates H-1B compliance, and also the founder of GMI Rocket, which is a digital marketing agency focused on the global immigration industry, and of course, which brings you this show. I am super excited for today's conversation because our guest today is building a tech company that's focused on the short-term business visa market. So this is something that a lot of immigration tech companies don't really tackle because, for the most part, law firms either maybe don't handle short-term business visas. A lot of folks do it on their own, or companies do it on their own. Maybe they see it as too simplistic, but the reality is there are so many people, who travel all around the world on short-term business visas every year. And it's quite complicated as well, even though most people try to do it themselves. So I'm really excited for today's guest. So today's episode number 117. Today's guest is James Tomlin, who is the co-founder and CEO of VisaDoc. And again, like I said, VisaDoc helps streamline and automate the business visa process. And with AI, it makes it possible to do it faster with fewer people, et cetera. So I'm really excited to hear about this application of artificial intelligence, versus what we've been seeing in the industry, which is like drafting, really writing heavy immigration applications or doing research and things like that. Before we jump into the episode, I just want to say thank you to our main sponsor of the show, DocketWise. So for those of you who may not know, DocketWise is an all-in-one immigration case management platform. So DocketWise has best-in-class immigration forums, U.S. immigration, really customizable questionnaires, industry-leading integrations, including with my company, Laborless, and great customer service. As I always say, one of the things I really love about DocketWise is not just, of course, how good their product is and how much people love their product, but about just how much they kind of give back to the industry. So, they have a podcast, they have an ebook, they have blogs, a lot of really great blogs that they put out. They sponsor things like this show and other things for the industry. So I feel like, DocketWise is one of those organizations that has great tech and also supports the industry. So check them out. There's a link in the notes below, or visit them at www.docketwise.com and tell them, of course, that you learned about them from the GMI Rocket Show. So long introduction, but without further ado, James, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. And I'm super excited to, learn about your story and VisaDoc.
Thank you very much. Yeah, pleased to be here and see you again.
So you are based in the UK, right? And you're currently there.
Yeah, I've forever been UK. I think, look, I've worked and lived overseas twice, early career for sure, but living in UK in the Home Office at the moment.
Nice. And we're going to get into your obviously your career and how you eventually came to start and build VisaDoc. But I like to just, generally speaking, with all the guests, dive a little bit into their background, learn about who they were when they were younger, right? Sometimes we have guests that were super entrepreneurial, even as kids, and others who had, no inclination of running a business or starting something of their own. So I guess I'm curious, from what you remember, right, when you were kind of growing up, going to grade school, were you kind of more of like a studious kid, head in the books, etc.? Were you kind of a little bit a hustler, selling cards or lemonade or whatever it is that kids did? I'm just curious if you remember that or had what your parents told you.
Yeah, no, certainly. I'd be pleased to go into it. There's probably a lot I blocked from my memory because I think I was, certainly for my parents, trouble in those early years. But yeah, certainly achieved well in grades, but for sure gave them a run for their money. Yeah, look, if we're going back very early years, I remember my sort of first venture was, getting secondhand computers from, if offices were getting rid of computers, matching them up and sort of reselling them. That was my sort of school gig, but that's been a while actually since I've even remembered that piece. Look, university as well. What do I remember about there? I studied accounting and finance. I don't really remember anything about the course, but what I do remember is I went through there and set up. I wanted to do skydiving. I realised kind of again that's pushing the boundaries of life, I guess, and couldn't afford to do it, so set up the university club to essentially fund my way to do it. And remember coming out with my international skydiving license. So yeah, it's certainly, I suppose that gives you a little bit into the world of the psyche of pushing the boundaries all the time, but trying to achieve something new and different.
I love that, because I had a similar experience when I was not very entrepreneurial at all as a student, as a young person, as a kid. I think I was more risk averse. We came to the U.S. as immigrants, and it was always study and do well in school. Not that I was the best student, but I knew that studying was the most important thing. And I think the thing that I found that was really interesting was that the first time I had a truly entrepreneurial experience was in law school. So similar to you, I was trying to get into the career of immigration law, and there was nothing in the school that was available to us. And so I started a club, like you said, and it's interesting because, and I want to hear more about that from your side. From my perspective, when I started the club, not only was it an entrepreneurial experience, and you have to name the club, you have to probably sort of go to the school administration or the student body and petition for it. But then you have to kind of market events, and you have to do things like that. And so that to me was really fun. I'm curious. Well, first, if you would, I would love to hear about your computer days, because this is probably when the computers that you were getting from offices were not typically available to most households, right? I mean, I'm assuming this is what, late 90s?
Yeah, I mean, there were desktop PCs for sure. I mean, you could strip them out. You would take out the CPUs,
Right.
strip out the
Yeah.
hard drives, get your RAMs, put them all back together, making it something that was actually had a little bit of value.
And so how are you able to get these from, how did you know to go to the companies, or how did you, buy them?
So this is stretching my mind back. I mean, that particular venture, I think it was a newspaper article that came out, right? And it was just saying the problems of businesses disposing of old equipment. You thought, well, actually, you know what, there's some value in there. And well, certainly when you're at school, you don't need much value in something to think it's a hell of a lot of money. So yeah, I thought that was the route. And we had just a garage full of computers for a while.
And so they were discarding them. I mean, you didn't have to buy them. You basically
just discarding.
Wow. Okay.
Take the best bits out of the best ones and recreate and sell.
That's really so. Then from that perspective, cool. So you got, I'm just thinking about it from a business standpoint. You get free inputs, which is amazing, right? Free hardware. You put a little bit of time and effort into it. How did you know what to do? How did you know, what parts did what? How to take them apart? How to put them back together?
I don't think anyone knows what they're doing in life, right? You just think and you do it and it works, and then you continue doing more of it, right? So I don't think. No, I think it was certainly an interest in them. I mean, as a kid at that age, computers were all very new and very interesting for sure. But there were certainly a few things I did that I didn't do right. But it's
so you kind of learned as you went. You put computers together. You kind of figured it out by reverse engineering it, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, I would say 100%. I mean, there's not so many components in a computer, and there's so many things that you can try, and it's not going to go terribly wrong. And if it does, it hasn't cost you anything. So you keep going until you get the result you want.
And then, I know I'm stretching your memory back, but I'm genuinely fascinated by this. By the way, when I was a kid, my uncle, he had a computer shop here in Israel. I'm in Israel right now, so he had a computer store, and this was, at a time when PCs were just becoming something people would buy, and folks would come in and custom order them. And so I learned how to build also desktop, get the motherboard, you put in, all the different drives into the slots, and you bolt in the CD player and, everything, close the thing and sell it to them. But he taught me, and he had a store. So from your perspective, you self-taught, but how did you get clients? I mean, how did you find people to buy PCs at that time from basically a kid in a garage?
So I can't remember the answer of getting the buyers. I'm fairly certain it was kind of either sort of free distribution paper or I can't remember the outlet at the time, but I mean, it was a relatively easy thing to sell at that point. You just needed to, I think it was a free paper or something. We put the adverts in. I'm sure this was pre-eBay days, but yes, must have been.
That's pretty, and I'm just, pulling from that. It's really interesting because you think about it, you intuitively saw value, right, in these discarded computers when you read the paper. And then you kind of, you put your time and energy into it. And then you found basically cheap or free resources to sell your product in a way, right?
Yeah, and you add your value in the middle, right? You create something
Right.
better out of somebody else's junk, for sure. Yeah.
I think it's it's like startup 101. I mean, this kind of example. That's why I find it really interesting. Cool. So you did that. You went to grade school, you went to university, and you studied at university. But it's interesting that for you, one of the most memorable things is starting the skydiving club. And I think that's really cool because I guess it's another moment where you were kind of flexing your entrepreneurial muscles. So after you did that, I know you went back out into the workforce. Can you, I don't know, talk a little bit about what were you thinking back then in terms of your career? Did you just want to do, anything in an office? Did you have a particular desire of an industry you wanted to be in? Like, where was your thinking at that time?
Yeah, look, I think at university I'd started to make a little bit of money. Had a lot of, you come out of university with a lot of debt as well. But I wanted to make money. That's all I knew when coming out of university. And I remember the first job I got, I still remember the interview, and I went to interview for a UK-based position, turn up for the interview, and they were like, okay, what do you know about the company? And then saying, well, I know you've got operations in Turkey. And they were saying, well, whereabouts? And I was like, blimey heck. So, well, I remember one city begins with A and one begins with I. And that was literally the extent of my knowledge in this interview. But they said, well, would you go there? And I was like, well, yes, okay. And then it was next week, pretty much. They were wanting me to go straight out there. But yeah, I think it was, look, I knew I liked sales. I knew I liked, I suppose, generating wealth, I suppose, or trying to create value, should I say, probably a better piece. But it was the excitement, it was the buzz, and certainly at that age, coming out of a very studious course, yeah, it was something fun to do.
What did this company do? What was the business?
Yes, it was a real estate business, and I was going to say another one. I mean, I remember actually probably my first foray into dealing with past this job offer through, and it was like, right, okay, you're going to go out. And I didn't have my passport. I think it had long expired by that point. So right, I need to get a passport, and they're like, well, how quickly can you get out there? So I booked an emergency at the local passport office to get my new passport quickly. Down there, gone through the whole process, gone through the queues of the passport, got out, parked, got into the car and drove off, and then got back home and realised I'd left the passport on the top of the car of the roof, so I'd lost my passport.
Oh my God.
But then it was get another passport appointment. I think this time was down in London because of the way my travel was before I flew out. And then go down there, and then there was some problems on the line. Trains were all cancelled, so I missed my passport appointment again. And then third passport appointment, second passport in 2 weeks. I think I ended up drove down to Cambridge to get it, but inexperience of trying to get a visa out somewhere and a passport sorted just as you've been offered a job was an interesting start. But that's the industry, and that's what I started in.
And it's kind of fascinating because people think that the passport piece is simple, and you don't really need any guidance, you don't need any management of it. But how often do employees who work at companies either doing long-term assignments or short-term business trips, how often do they have an expired passport? They forget it somewhere. They, mess something up, and it could delay significantly, their travels and obviously things for the company. I, as an immigration lawyer, and I work in the industry, I lost my passport a couple of years ago. I was, what I was doing? I was walking out of the apartment, doing the tap, right? I was tapping my right pocket for my cell phone, my smartphone, my right pocket for my wallet, and my back pocket for my passport. And I was like, oh, my passport's not here. Okay, I probably left it on the cabinet over there in the room. And I walked over to the room, and then 3 hours later, the whole apartment had been turned around, and I didn't know where it was. So I had to cancel everything. And I was flying for a conference, and it was really, really frustrating. And so it's just interesting and a good reminder that even the seemingly kind of quote unquote basic aspects of immigration, right? Having a passport that's not expired, making sure you have everything ready for a very simple visa, right? A short-term business trip, et cetera, actually can cause problems. So it's interesting that you had that experience before you even thought about going into the industry. So you did that for a handful of years, and then you started. I understand that you started your own kind of business, right, early on.
Yeah. So I mean, I was in the oil and gas. I mean, I was doing the overseas property piece, not for particularly long. It was an exciting piece, but came back and was doing the oil and gas recruitment, and that was I mean, it was all international pieces, moving a hell of a lot of people in lots of locations, right? And yeah, I was relatively young and earning very good money at the time in doing so. But then, on the back of that, and I can talk to you about some fascinating visa stories in there as well. But yeah, it was on the back of that oil and gas collapsed down to I think it's $20 a barrel. This was going back a time and thought, you know what, this industry, it was just absolutely dead. And I thought, well, actually, if you've got an oil rig is essentially a big ship with a derrick on the top of it, I'm going to go into shipping, thinking it was going to be very, very similar, but set up my own shipping executive practice. And it was, yeah, look, made profit out of it pretty quickly, right? And it was a good thing, but boy, it was so different to the oil and gas market. Yeah.
So what was the business? I mean, were you recruiting executives in the industry for businesses, or kind of what were you doing there?
Yeah, so that was doing that, but specifically within the shipping market, right? So your ship management companies, your ship owners, and then sort of the board positions and pieces around there. I mean, fascinating insight, fascinating world.
And so is this the first time that you were sort of now managing a business where you had to deal with, I guess, cross-border employees, not of your own, obviously, but that you're recruiting for?
Yeah, I mean, there was. So if you look at the shipping market, there's huge. As I said, a much bigger volume than the oil and gas markets for moving people across borders. But the level I was dealing with, it was certainly just senior executives. I think if I looked back at the oil and gas market, you've got a lot higher paid people, but a lot more of them going into these sort of contracts overseas oil and gas markets. I mean, I was placing people all over the world. There was a time I could have told you, and don't quiz me, but every single country in Africa, I could have told you the dialing code of every single oil and gas producing country. Everywhere, I could have told you the name of every single drill ship in across the coast of West Africa. But that was moving a lot of people, and they were all earning hefty salaries as well, but a lot of pressure when you didn't get that right. If you didn't get somebody onto a rig site on time, delays in these projects upset a lot of people. So it's very, very critical.
What were some of the issues, I guess, that you ran into at the time in terms of, what could cause a delay if somebody getting to a rig on time?
Yeah. So what could cause delay, and the problem with the delay, I think the problem with the delay first, to kind of look at that piece. And then I think you realize how disproportionate probably our fees are as an industry, right? But if you've got a rig and it had a drilling window and they've rented this rig, right? The rig's costing £500,000 a day to rent. People's salaries on there are up to sort of £2,000 a day. And you've got a window though of this rental for say a month to go and drill this wildcat or something, right? After that, you've spent a huge amount of money in getting the licensing, getting everything else to go and do this well. So it has to be done in this very tight window, or you could be costing billions, right? In lost opportunity, lost costs, and everything else. And so you have to have your team out there on time. And these senior people were getting paid insane money at the time, but if sometimes problems were completely out of your control. Like one time, somebody flew through a country, had someone they were flying, I think it was from the UK, I can't remember where through, but they wanted to fly through Egypt or something. But they got there, they were like, well, they didn't turn up. We were tracking down where they'd gone, and they decided, well, actually, they got to the first airport, got off, and flew off somewhere else, and they went to another gig, and it was they just changed their mind pretty much halfway through trip. So things like that would put a lot of pressure on. But from a process perspective, from getting your visas and things, yeah, look, it was complex. People were all over the world. Most of these oil and gas workers, you'd get them straight onto 2 passports for the purpose of processing a passport whilst they're using another passport. You know, it would be quite common to have somebody might fly in from Malaysia. You know, you've got the passport being processed in the UK. You meet them at the airport to hand their passport over so they could fly out straight to site. You know, the logistics and the complexity of some of these pieces, but, you know, for the necessity of having them there as quickly as you possibly could get. What else do we have? We'd have like, I remember like getting a medical, for instance, one particular person, we had to get him there on time. He was in the UK. Medicals were going to take longer to get in the UK. So flying them out round trip to the US because we were going to get quicker processing time on this medical that had to be authorized by the company to get him back to the UK than to fly him out whilst his visa was processing. But yeah, the logistics behind it, but the money, if you didn't get someone out there, was so big that you know, it had to be achieved. And yeah, and you look at today what an immigration fees are, it's nothing compared to the pressure that this was under and the risk.
Definitely. It's really fascinating. It's cool too, because you get to learn about how other industries operate. I mean, for example, I just learned something about oil and gas. I didn't know that rigs were rented effectively by the day or by some period of time. And I can only imagine the massive pressure that that puts on those organizations. And then therefore on all of the downstream suppliers, you know, whether it's you supplying people or somebody else supplying equipment or whatever it might be. That's really interesting. I wanted to give a quick pause because we've got just a few comments of people saying hi. Hi, Imelda from who's in London. We've got LinkedIn user from Tucson, Arizona, and from Sri Lanka. So that's Sarah. So hi, Sarah. I think for some reason your name isn't coming up on LinkedIn. Jorge says hi from Miami. Damien says hi from London as well. Neuron, hey both, also from London. So thank you guys for the comments. Please, you know, drop comments here. And obviously, if you have questions for James as we go, you know, let him know. The beauty of doing this live initially is that we can actually have this conversation with the listeners. So let us know. Okay, so after you've done this, you started your business. I guess at some point you closed the business down because I know you went over to work at a company called VisaHQ. So I'm just curious a little bit, you know, can you talk a little bit about that transition? Because I would say that at this point, this is where you've sort of, from your career, from the point of view of your career, you've now ventured into this global mobility space. You know, you were doing recruiting, and yes, a lot of that had to do with procuring visas for people probably and moving them overseas. But arguably you were in recruiting before. Now you're suddenly in this sort of global mobility, global immigration services space. So I'm just curious, you know, what made you switch to that, and what was your time like at VisaHQ when you were there?
Yeah. Let me place you. So, yeah, look. So I was using these services a lot in this recruitment piece. Familiar with what, you know, the likes of VisaHQ were doing. I remember actually from the, I suppose you call it client side, but getting people stuck in country, right? And I had a couple of people stuck in Angola for a long time, couldn't get them out, and the challenges this was caused. But look, there was this opportunity that came up. I mean, it was VisaHQ, very good company, very good technology, good kind of global presence. And yeah, it was they were very much, I'd say at the time when I joined them in the consumer market, predominantly dealing with the tourist things, but to take them into the business corporate world. And it was like, yes, look, there's opportunity there for them. They've got a good basis for growth. Yeah, look, really enjoyed the time there, and can certainly talk for a long time about the pieces we connected, right? And how there was a lot there bringing the immigration, short-term business travel, huge amounts of learning from that space. And yeah, we can dive into if you wish.
Yeah, please. I mean, I'd love to hear more, because I think to me, this is where you kind of got into that, you know, into the also in technology aspect. So, you know, I guess you were doing business development, strategic partnerships. I mean, you were helping the organization grow. And in that sense, you were kind of spreading the word about using SaaS, right? Using a software solution for global mobility and for global travel. So, you know, this was back in 2017. I know you were there until about 2020, basically until COVID hit. What was it like back then? I mean, in 2017, 2018, sort of going to organizations and selling global mobility related, immigration related software. What were, some of the trends that you saw, maybe challenges or pushback that you got? Curious to see how it would compare to, what we're seeing now, if it was different or if it was similar.
Yeah, I think the world is, I mean, it's not that long ago, right? Certainly from my perspective, but the world's changed massively since that time. But no, I mean, it was a really fun time. It was relatively easy, I'd say, getting traction in that marketplace. I mean, certainly, look, when I started, they were delivering short-term business visas. Competitive wise, you really had two competitors in market. I can mention them. There's no risk, right? You had CRBT essentially with the number one competitor. They had been purchased by an immigration, or they purchased Newland Chase, the immigration company. And so from a partnerships perspective, I had a very easy run. It was going to everyone that was using them and saying, look, if you're an immigration company, you've got a competitive risk now if you're continuing to use CRBT, and your clients are going to do the same. And set up some very good alliances, set up alliances and partnerships with most of the big four, traveled around most of the globe in there, working with them, building these things out, presenting to their clients, and as well as picking up a lot of direct corporate as well. And using technology, it brought a lot of advantages, right? If I think we certainly had leading technology in the industry at that point. Sorry, I'm just going to something to turn this off. Yeah, look, it was that was where it is. And then I think a lot of the pieces probably that are similarities today as well. Look, when you were selling technology, certainly 2017, 2018, was data security and all the rest of it. But it was like, well, actually, once you start using technology, you enhance actually the data protection, because you've got less, you've got much more control of where your documents are and who's managing those documents and what's going on. But yeah.
Did you feel like you got a lot of pushback, or were companies typically excited to, sign up with a SaaS product that is going to help them digitize, global visas and mobility and things like that?
Yeah, I don't think there was particularly much pushback. Really, I think the thing was I think if you've got the right company you're talking to, right? If you've got a large enough company with a large enough global distributed workforce, they know they've got the need. They're going to have a pain in managing that. I think it was just it was quite complex in what you're introducing and how you're putting that in place. They've got large managed travel programs with large volumes of things going through, and just the complexity, I suppose, is managing up to that global workforce and being in the number of locations and being able to deliver those solutions in different locations. But from a complexity of sale, from my previous experience in the world, no, I'd say back then it was certainly quite a straightforward piece.
Yeah, it's great to hear, because I feel that, when a company moves from doing something manually or analog to doing it digitally, there's a little bit of a hump. It's a barrier that they have to break through. So I guess you were a great salesperson. That's like you're the salesman.
No, never would I claim that. No, I mean, it was a good team. It was good products, but yeah.
So I wanted to, and I guess there's a couple of things, and I'm not going to get into every single thing in your background because you've done so many things in the industry. But I was particularly interested in a company that you worked at for a little bit too. So one of them called Safeture, right? Yeah. So this is, from my understanding, they did cross-border COVID passporting. Can you talk a little bit about that? I find that fascinating.
Yeah, so Safeture, I mean, it was a SaaS only company. I mean, I say only, it's still in existence, a very good company. So they were looking at, they were a security platform essentially. It was selling into predominantly sort of heads of security within companies. Now, security, travel risk management are very, very closely aligned. And it was, I started there. So 20th of March, 2020, COVID pretty much struck, and had my firstborn and left, and then joined this company at cross-border traveler security. And it was, look, nobody's traveling. What are all the options? What can be done? And it was a fascinating world at that time. Everybody was running around kind of thinking, right, okay, what can we do in this market? So, some of the people I was being able to bring into conversations, and some of the people we were driving forward yeah, look, really thankful for it. We're looking at how do we get people across border, for instance, right? Can we bring together something where we're working with medical providers to say this person's safe to travel? Can we work with insurers to say, yes, they'll insure people if they go into certain locations? And as well, bringing people back into the office. How could we look at the time at that particular time, can we say somebody's declared themselves as medically fit or fit to come into an office because of the COVID outbreak, and then can essentially track their locations and make sure that only fit people are coming into the office or people are staying at home. So, but look, these were all kind of just ideas we were playing with at the time to sort of see, right, what does the market need? What do they want? Look, as a tool, there was a lot of crossover within the global mobility, and that's what fascinated me the most, in the fact that, look, knowing where somebody is, knowing that there's a security risk is very closely aligned to how many days are they in a country. Is there a tax risk? Is there an immigration risk? Is there a compliance risk? If you're sending somebody overseas into a country from a global mobility perspective, it's their health, their immigration risk, their tax risk, their safety, their security, and that really stuck in that space of the market very, very well.
So, and I know that you worked, obviously this was during, I was actually in Italy in 2022. And I remember I had I had my New York State COVID pass. And then I think in Europe, I had to have some green pass or some blue. I don't remember even anymore. And I was thinking to myself, definitely I was like, listen, there's gotta be a better way to do this. I have to travel the world, and every single region has its own protocols. And I wish there was some kind of a global document that I can show or something like that,
Yeah, I mean, it was insane. I mean, there was a big one we were sort of having some talks with. There was the Commons Project. I think it was that was the name of it. And big names, and they were throwing mega money behind it of kind of, right, how do we build a solution for this? You mentioned one of the solutions there. I think there were probably 4 or 5 that were trying to push out at the same time in different countries, and that was the challenge, right? Because like one state would say, well, actually, we're going to back this solution. A travel company might say, well, we want to back this solution. You can't really get a global consensus. And the approach we were trying to take was, well, look, we're not looking at the individuals, but more of, well, actually, let's look at the corporate. So passporting back into the office, but then also, how do we get somebody across the border? What's stopping somebody crossing a border? Well, actually, probably the biggest thing was insurance, right? If you can't get insurance to go over there, you're not going to go if you're working for a corporate, right? So could we work with the insurers, the medical database providers, the assessment centers, and then kind of bring a solution where you could have a passport based on, approval from a head of a corporate perspective to go and do this travel. But yeah, it was a crazy world, and I think a lot of us would like to forget it and hope it never gets back to that world.
Sorry for bringing it up. So I'm trying to think in terms of your background. If you start looking at all these things and putting them together, you kind of entered the space accidentally, right? I mean, you worked in you did staffing that was cross-border. And so, yes, you had to certainly deal with visas and, aligning passports with different people, et cetera, et cetera. And then you got this job at VisaHQ, and suddenly you took that experience you had from the staffing and human capital perspective and brought in the SaaS kind of service provider perspective, right? And then, at some point, I guess, right, you must have started to think, I'm curious, maybe it didn't happen yet, but when did you start thinking about, there are greater needs in this space, right? The short-term business travel, visas that companies are maybe offloading to the employee to handle. Like, when did you start thinking about, okay, there's something missing here, and maybe I'm the right person to plug that gap?
Yeah. And then look, I had those years of experience working in that short-term business world and working with some of the smartest and best people in the industry, certainly from a immigration side. And look, there was constant questions in mind of, well, actually, look, this is an insanely complex place. You've got huge amounts of variations globally. You're dealing with governments that capturing information from them is nigh impossible, right? They're going to tell you one thing, but it might be slightly different when you're making an application for a visa, because you've got, country diplomacies going on, and they don't want to announce various things. And then, very, very strong relationship with the head of products, that I was working with there. I mean, we together when we were there, we built phenomenal growth and revenue out of the company, and over the years afterwards, continued to talk with him. He went into AI startups, and then it was about probably a little bit longer ago, 9 months ago, 10 months ago, a large client figure, somebody we've worked with in the past, had said, look, we've got this problem. And we're like, look, we need to come in and fix this, because this is what the industry we had been talking about between ourselves. And thought, right, it's time to go and make that action. And it's, look, a lot of it is looking at it. How do we couldn't be doing what we're doing today 4 years ago, for sure. That's for certain. The technology wasn't there, the capability wasn't there. But it's, working with a really, really strong, very smart head of product, being able to go through, the industry. Where are the challenges? Where are the problems? Why are we having to do these steps? How can we simplify this? How can we bring technology and automation and AI into that capability as well? But yeah.
So I want to take a quick pause there just for a second, just to say thank you to the second sponsor of the show, which is Journey Business Plans. So Journey is spelled Joorney. And for folks who don't know, and this is not just for U.S. immigration folks, this is really for folks in Canada, and UK, Australia, all over the world. Journey is actually a provider of business plans for immigration purposes. And they partner with immigration firms and global mobility professionals, and they create business plans for all sorts of kind of investor and business visa types. In the US, we have E2 investor visa, EB5 investor visa, EB2 national interest waiver, and more. And then again, if you're a person who works in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Singapore, UAE, France, you name it, Journey helps you, or can help you, or your client, with immigration business plans. So check them out. I've known them for a number of years. They're a really great team. They've expanded globally and impressively, really recently. And I'm grateful that they're a supporter of the show. So for anybody who's out there who needs a business plan for their clients, or honestly, if you're starting your own business and you want to talk to somebody, an organization that's done thousands and thousands of them, check them out. There's a link in the bio, in the show notes rather, or visit them at Joorney, Joorney.com. And when you talk to someone there, tell them you heard about them from the GMI Rocket show. So thank you to Journey. And James, just to get back to you, I think that, this is somewhat of a recent development, right? And I know that your company's been around. I know you've been thinking about it and working on it for a little while. You launched relatively recently. You kind of came out of stealth mode, I should say, relatively recently. So I'm trying to understand a little bit. You had a friend or a colleague that was working in the AI space. They were approached by an organization to help them build something to handle business visas. And then this person came to you and said, James, here's a problem. I've got X skills. You've got Y skills. Let's put our brains together and build this out.
So I think, look, we have been communicating ever since we've been working together in this space, where he was head of product within this industry and I'd been leading the space. And yeah, look, I had the conversation with him. I remember flying over to go and meet him. We sat the days, sat down and went through it all, and just like, yes, let's make the move. So he's been dedicated for many months now in building this capability. Yeah, look, it was based on client want, client demand. We've taken a phenomenal amount of time, though. We've been absolutely blessed and really thankful for the number of people who have supported us, but also engaged with us, spent time with us, gone through their current processes, gone through their problems, reviewed what we're trying to do, and turned around and said, yes, look, this would fit, this wouldn't fit, and had that sort of capability and build out. Look, I think the other amazing piece we've got is that he's spent the last 4 years in AI as well. And certainly when we're looking at a lot of the problems that we currently have, or the industry had, right? And then how can we, yes, simplify it, but use a lot of that technology to drastically change that pace and the problems that we've got in the industry. We've got a very, very good answer. We've launched, we've got the products out there, we've got live partners, we've got live clients using the platform already. So it's a journey of growth at this moment.
Now, by the way, is this Oleg?
Yes,
You're
yes,
talking
yeah.
about? Yeah. So just to put it out, the Oleg Voronko, I'll also tag him, fellow Ukrainian. So I appreciate that. And so, right? Did I get that? He's Ukrainian?
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Cool. I assumed, but then I was like, wait, I probably shouldn't assume. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, right? You before you went into VisaDoc full time. You kind of like, how long did it take you? Because I think this part of the journey is really important. How long did it take you to decide that you're going to work on this, full time? I know you were, I guess you were working at Jobatical at the time. Is that right? And I mean, you had to have made the leap at some point, and that's the scariest part for most people. Part of the reason I do this show is, to learn about the entrepreneur behind the company, to understand their motivation, and also to see, well, okay, how did they actually do it? Because I think many people in our industry have great ideas, but often are held back because they're afraid or because there's no roadmap for them. So I'm just curious, how did you make that leap? How did you make the decision that this was the right time versus let's just keep talking about this sort of nights and weekends?
Yeah, it's good. Very, very good question, right? I mean, I've had my own firm before, and certainly, the experience is no different. And there's never a right time, and it doesn't get any. Yes, making that initial commitment of a decision is a challenge, but it's always going to be a different world, and you're always going to have that pressure of decision making. Like, how do you make that decision? Everybody's going to have a different journey on that route. Look, I think I've been blessed to be able to work with Ola as well. He's been running AI startups himself previously. He's got a lot of knowledge and capability and strength in that market. But look, if I was working with anybody else, it's really the team, the market, the support that you get from everybody around you. You have those conversations with your clients, or prospective clients, right? Have those conversations with your employer. The more without the network of people around kind of supporting this path, supporting the route, supporting what we're doing and helping us on the journey, we wouldn't be here, right? It's not us together that have said we're going to take this to market. It's the market that said, come to us, this is what we want, and we'll give you the support to get there. So I think that's been a crucial part of this journey in that step.
So what would you say to somebody else? I mean, do you think that, they should wait till the market tells them we're clearly ready to put money into this and to make this viable before kind of jumping full time? Or what do you think from that perspective?
If you've got money to put into something, I think you're blessed to start with, right? So yeah, look, you can always, if you've got the money to put into something, start doing something at least. There's plenty of hours in the day. You can start something as a side project, start to give it some testing in market, try and get that validation. I wouldn't say to anyone, just go and do it. You've got to think about your own situation. Yes, you've got to think of those external factors and, do that sort of validation and testing at the startup process. But it is quite easy. It's very easy, right, to sit in a company and say, I could do this better. This is my idea is better. Oh, I could. It's to sort of take that into market is a big step, right? And I think if anyone's thinking about it, 100% give it some serious thought and see, how to do it and do try and get to that point. And it's certainly rewarding, but at the same time, it's not going to be for everyone, right? For sure.
All right. So let's talk about VisaDoc. What is VisaDoc? What does it do?
Yeah. Perfect. Nice. This is to talk all day about this. I think we've not got huge amounts of time left. Look, VisaDoc is business visas is an insanely complex place, right? Yes, it's process pretty much. How do we simplify process? So there's, I say, kind of two core elements of this. So one is the amount of, look, on a global basis, the number of different business visas, what you have to do to apply, how you can apply, the wait times, the embassies you go to, that process, huge amounts of variance. Very, very difficult to get information out of even official sources, your government agents or your governments in some circumstances. But how do we bring all of that information into a central location? How do we get the right information? And it would be a whole nother story if I talked to you about the whole challenges of that and actually getting accuracy of authority score of data. How do you make sure that data is up to date? and how do you give that certainty to individuals? So it's capturing, look, 100, I think it's about 180 something thousand different variations globally just on the basic business visas. How you can act behind that as well is all going to be very different, right? UK outbound, I think we've got about 6,000 different variations at the moment of things you can go through. So look, it's capturing that upfront data, right? It's very much corporate compliance tool as well. So look, once you've got that traveller information, so that you know that they've got an easy ride ahead, they're clear and they've got concise detail. With all your global traveller population, how do you know they're getting the right visa? And this is where I think a fascinating piece on the immigration world is, look, we can feed in the PNRs, we get the traveller data, every single piece on the traveller information. Yes, we can say, this is, you're going for a conference, right? This is valid for, we call it a business visa. It could be under different terms, but a short-term visa for business trip purposes, right? So, and then how do we track the number of days they're in a country, for example, to say, yes, your visa is valid. If you're going to the Schengen area, for instance, you're capturing your 90, 180-day ruling. You're not going outside of that. Or if your visa is coming up for expiry, you're not going beyond that. So how do we bring that all together for tracking, for compliance, and then the other big part of it is the fulfillment, right? Completing doing your actual visa. And it was, I think, a lot of the struggle at the moment is with, the traditional way of doing things is you've got to have a visa processing agent on the back end. They're sat on a desk physically checking people's documents that get sent in, and then there's that sort of whole, every time you're touching a document, it's going through, process, you're introducing risk, you've got delays, so how do we strip out as much possible process in doing that? So, it's using the AI to take information out of the passport, to be able to validate photos, to be able to check your invitation letters and make sure it's automatically checked that it's got the best possible chance at getting the result you want. And how do we use all that AI for the completion and automation in most cases of the business visa? So once you take out that massive database, you can bring in a huge amounts of automation. Yes, you still have people behind it, right, verifying, but you strip out a lot of that overhead, that operational cost, but you also then introduce the ability to deliver on a global basis. So you can go into those obscure locations and you can give somebody a lot of support on the ground. And if you're dealing with a corporate, you can say, look, everybody's gone through, they've obtained the right visa, they've had the support that they can to get those visas, and it can be fulfilled. And then also you've got global tracking of visas. So, you're not going to, you're going to reduce your risk of fine or being banned from countries. But at the same time, once you capture that start of travel, there's a lot that comes out of this. Doesn't match a business visa. You're going over for work reasons. There's an immigration assessment here to throw out to somebody. An immigration provider needs to be stood on there on the back end for those, that immigration casework. That's not.
So it's like a flag that comes up.
Yeah, exactly right. So you don't need a business visa to travel to a location, right? So if I'm going, I don't know, London to Manchester, I don't need a business visa. I need a business visa if I'm going to India, for instance. Is my existing visa valid? Or if I'm going to India and I'm doing something that doesn't fit the business or the standard requirements of a business visa, this is immigration assessment, right? So that will then be pushed out. But you're capturing that early point. Certainly sitting on the immigration side of the fence. Where do you typically get your immigration requests? They're coming from typically head of global mobility, head of HR. But they're not seeing all their business travelers, and they're not being able to verify. Actually, there's a lot of business travelers who are going there for immigration risk. So, yeah, I think there's great collaboration in bringing our capability together with those immigration providers to hopefully increase their work, making sure their clients are more compliant, but just managing that high volume piece of complexity. But it's not a legal process by any means.
We had a great question here from Damian Porter, who asked, how exactly are you using AI differently to your competitors in the market? I mean, exactly, maybe you don't want to give away all of your secret sauce, but definitely would be interested to hear how AI comes into play with VisaDoc when you're supporting clients with their global business visas.
Yeah. So tell me which competitors in the market are using AI. I'm not aware of it, right? But I think, look, the big part is capturing that global data it's so insanely complex. But using AI in that, yes, we've got AI chat. Look, what's that? It's the data set we've got behind it, but you can go onto the site, you can type anything in, and you've got our AI that's been trained on a huge amount of data sets behind that as well. And then, as I say, using the AI in verification of documents, giving that confirmation, removing the human from process as much as we possibly can. And that, look, as I say, it reduces complexity, it reduces overhead, it reduces cost for the end individual, and as well, it increases that certainty. And the least times you can touch a document, the least times you have to handle a document, the safer everything is and the more secure it is.
Do you see that there's any? I know that business visas don't typically require a lot of drafting and heavy kind of writing, but are there areas within this process where AI can help? With a somewhat, let's call it quote unquote a creative process. So not just analyzing data points coming from a passport or from something else, but putting something together that's then used for the visa application. Do you see that in this space?
The visa application itself is fairly structured
Right.
in the way that process goes through. What I have really enjoyed about seeing of our technology is actually the responses it's giving out to people, right? It goes through the assessment. Yes, it's using our logic engine. It's using all of that information and knowledge to create those answers. I mean, certainly over the last few days, we're seeing some very obscure testing locations, for instance, and you see the result that comes out and how the AI has kind of put that together and created that sort of response email. I think I've been fascinated by it myself at times. I think,
I see. So it's not that it's drafting, it's not putting content or writing together from the visa application process, but more so the communication to the user.
Yeah, look, communication to the user, verification of documents, but yeah, look, there is a large part of AI within the capture of data. It's constantly got to be kept up to date. How are you giving authority scores to different sets of data? Where are you capturing that data from? But then as well for that continuing monitoring and putting that data into a tangible form for the end user. Yeah, there's lots of process and complexity within the AI build for that.
That actually leads me to, I think, my next question, and I think a really important question in this type of for this type of process. How do you keep up to date with all the permutations and variations of business visa needs? Because we chatted about this earlier. In some countries, it's the official information is on the web. It's on the government site, and what's there is the thing that you have to follow. Right. But not every country has that. I mean, many countries have, somewhat more unofficial updates. Sometimes maybe the official updates is lagging, and the only way you can know that is if you're on the ground. So how do you make sure that your platform always knows exactly what changes are happening around the world?
Yeah, look, it's an insanely complex piece. I think there's multiple things we've tried to do to address this element, right? But I think look at anybody's data set out there in the market at the moment, or previously to ourselves being out there, and very quickly you can find problems in the data, right? You can say, well, that's clearly not accurate because you're relying on a human to update and provide those instances as they happen in most cases out there. Look, there's a few things of getting the accuracy of data, right? And that was a big part we started to look at. So, I think every element of our data on there, it's when was this last verified? You've got the date stamp on there, how that's been verified as well, right? So, something might change overnight, but look, with the frequency of travelers going through there, once somebody's completed it, that data is always continually monitored and refined and updated, right? Based on that real experience, as well as cross-referencing that with, official data sources, as well as scouring various other data points to see if there's anything that might be conflicting with what the official governments and things are saying. So yeah, it's a big data churn piece, but it's giving that information up front. And look, where there'll always be a location. At the moment, what do we have? Antarctica seems to be a popular piece for people to test our website out on. I don't know why. I think it's just we know there's not a big population out there, but it's seeing the answers that come back out of it. It's doing it very well, right? It's giving clear, accurate information of what your options are, where you can go, how you can do it, and what those steps are going to be forward for you.
All right. So I know when I'm going to Antarctica next, I will go to VisaDoc and assess my business travel there.
Yeah, thanks.
I got a lot of business to do with the polar bears.
Yeah.
And the penguins. So okay, got it. And that makes sense. And the reason I want to ask that is because, typically if you're relying on a database rather than calling, an immigration professional in the destination country, you obviously want to make sure that data is up to date. And it's always been one of those things that felt like it should be done and could be done better with technology. But then sometimes, as you said, you run into issues where you have to find that data in other sources because they're not always available in the kind of primary official government sources.
Yeah, and there will be instances we just don't have the data, right? I'm
Right.
trying to think of an example, but I can't on the top of my head. But if you've got an obscure, I don't know, location where there's very small population and there's no travel and it's miles away from any embassy, and you're going somewhere else equally obscure. But look, there's always the ability we'll give the data we know we've got. We give the data of how accurate, and we'll be clear of how accurate we think that data is. We'll give you the data that data was verified as well, and we'll give you the certainty of it, right? Mm-hmm. You can still easily go and get a human support if you want, right? If you were saying, look, I need more from this. I need to get somebody on the ground to go and do this for me. It can always interlink straight with a human on that point, but really it's by being able to have that access to the information, you can make that decision. Do I need a human to be engaged with this process, or can I use this capability and technology?
So what are you seeing for, the growth of VisaDoc and maybe the global business visa industry? I mean, I think I've read recently that after COVID kind of, let's just say, ended, there was huge emphasis on travel, right? People went back to traveling in droves, and there's a prediction that business travel is going to continue to increase. So where do you see the industry going, and I guess where do you see the product growing, VisaDoc growing, to align with the growth of the industry?
Yeah, two good questions, right? I mean, we've taken this launching of VisaDoc is seeing an opportunity in the market and a need from clients. But also seeing that continued growth in this sector. Business growth is business travel is continuing to grow. Visas will forever remain a level of complexity. Yes, some of it's becoming more online and automated, which we think is a good thing. But as well, look, I think when we've got the crossover with the global mobility world, right? I think over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot more people, work from anywhere, working in locations that companies weren't in before. Well, actually, you've suddenly got a whole load of different business visa travel complexity that you've got to introduce or understand from your company that you probably haven't had to deal with before. They're starting to travel again, bringing those connections back together. And look, as politics continues to continually change and everything, that complexity's still there, right? And how are you going to do that piece?
And so where do you envision VisaDoc continuing to grow, in parallel with that?
Yeah, look, it's being able to simplify something that's you've got an increase in business travel, right? We've got a continually increasing complexity of requests from the corporate side, and also look with that and continuing need to increase being able to prove that you're being compliant, right? So I think from a corporate side, I think it's going to be significant growth in that capability and that removal of, well, actually we can do things more cost effectively here. We've got better control, we've got better visibility, we've got better compliance. Yeah, so I see massive growth opportunity for there. I think that where VisaDoc is at the moment, it is in its sort of infancy, really building up those partnerships, building up those alliances with those relocation companies, those travel management companies, those immigration companies, to be able to support and make their job easier and enhance their client offering. I think its growth path, certainly for the next year or so. That's where it is, Roman.
Do you envision more corporates using VisaDoc directly, or do you envision, as you said, more service providers like RMCs, immigration firms that support corporates? Do you see them using VisaDoc, or maybe both?
Yeah. Look, I think there's massive space for both, right? I think there's benefit to a corporate to want to use it directly. hang about. I think in a lot of instances, if that corporate has got an immigration provider, there's a massive benefit to bring both of those together as a single solution, right? Whether that solution is delivered from the immigration provider, going in and having that solution to manage that part of their program for the short-term business travel, whether that's a short-term business travel solution direct and then spitting out the results of an immigration assessment required, and that's for the corporate or their chosen provider. I think there's massive space within all of that.
And so I guess you guys are currently out of your beta, you're fully launched. Who do you want to reach out to you at this moment? Because we're here, we're talking, people are listening, and so I think there's a lot of excitement about our artificial intelligence in immigration and specifically in business travel. Who do you feel that you want to hear from now who you could help with your product?
Yeah, look, I think making some assumptions on the audience here as well, though. There's massive capability bringing this with immigration, right? Immigration, you don't typically want to touch business travel. It's high volume. It should be high volume. If it's not, it's not being done right. It's huge amounts of different information. Well, and I think there's, VisaDoc is yours, right? VisaDoc is an immigration company's product if they want it to be. How can they use it to better position themselves with a client, offer their client a better service, be able to say to a client, you know what, yes, we're doing your immigration for your short-term assignments, your long-term assignments, and your permanent assignments, but let us help you capture your business travel and make sure that everybody's effectively doing the right piece on the business travel. As an immigration provider, you've got visibility of, you can see, well, actually, yes, everybody is obtaining the right visa type, or you can go and advise your client across their whole global mobility program. Are you being legally compliant? Are you doing your immigration where needed across every single category of business? So I think it hopefully increases everybody's scope of capability. Look, we're not owned by, we're not controlled by any immigration firm, right? So we have no allegiances here. It's for you guys to go and use to your advantage. You let us know what you want to do, how you want to do it. We'll gladly have that conversation and see how we can help you.
So the idea there would be an immigration firm using VisaDoc, perhaps white labeled or what have you, kind of as their own product, and then providing a support now to their clients with business travel, like with short-term business visas. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, immigration companies, you tell me, right? Relocation companies, you tell me. But that short-term business travel market, if you're telling a client you're doing their immigration and they're going on business trips and they're doing work under a business visa, well, actually, shouldn't you be giving them a solution to that? And if you don't give them a solution to that and they need a solution, who's going to go and pick it up? There's, it's two immigration companies that are owned by short-term business travel companies, right? You're then got yourself exposed to a risk factor of losing your work to a competitor, right? So look, we're here to help support industry, clients. We want to work with everybody on the immigration side of things. Look, what we're doing is a complex piece, but it's a very, very small piece, right? But we just want that to be a benefit to everybody out there.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, this is my, I guess, value add, if you will, with Laborless. We tell companies the same thing. You're handling people's H-1B visas, which is high volume work visa in the U.S., and then the compliance part, you leave them to their own devices. And why not have a tool that allows you to close that gap? I think that's great for client retention. I also think it's great if you're in an RFP and a potential client is asking you, what are the different services you can provide? Where do you use technology, et cetera? And you can now say, for VisaDoc, for example, well, we provide traditional immigration services, and we also can support your short-term visa travel, which probably comes in high numbers using an AI tool. I think that's a good sales pitch. So, and I guess I'm doing your sales pitch here for you, but I kind of, I'm aligned with you philosophically. And so that's why I wanted to ask this question, to hear your perspective, and honestly, to just give this information to the listeners of the show and the viewers of the show, because if they're thinking the same thing you're thinking and you have a product for them, well, they should check it out. So, yeah, that's great. So James, as a kind of a final question, I want to go back a little bit in time. You had that interview, the very first interview. Did you go to Turkey? Did you actually end
Yeah,
up
yeah,
living in
yeah,
Turkey?
yeah. That's
All right.
good.
I love Turkey. I have a good friend who lives there, and I've been many times. Just curious from your perspective, what was a favorite thing about Turkey that you will kind of never forget?
I was so I was early 20s, and a certain period of my life, and I don't think it's probably appropriate to talk about that on it. But it was good party life, should we say? Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Where was the good party life in Istanbul?
Yeah. Let's say, yeah. No, it was absolutely brilliant, brilliant, brilliant memories. Very fun, very fond.
Nice. And then,
Sure.
all right. So then the question I can ask you, after a late night of partying, what was your go-to food?
Good question. It's I'm just trying to remember back, Rowan. I don't remember the food after the partying, but yeah.
Fair enough.
Maybe
Fair enough.
I'll
Well,
mention it publicly when I do remember it on the.
I last time I tried wet hamburgers for the first time. I'm sure I don't know if you've ever had those. They're like little burgers that they put into almost like a steam box, and they're so delicious. And the last time I was in Turkey a few years ago, I tried them for the first time. So good. I mean, it's like street fast food, but I mean, beats anything in the U.S. out of the water. So that's why I wanted to ask you. Love Turkey. I love the food in Turkey, and actually now I'm hungry and I can't wait to get back. Um, anyway, James, thank you so much. This is really fun, really interesting, and I'm glad we got a chance to talk about what you're building with VisaDoc again, because there's just not much being done in the short-term business travel space, especially with technology and AI. So, wishing you guys the best of luck, and excited to continue to see where you take the product and the business. So thank you, James, for being here. It's really great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. We had so many great comments. I think I didn't put a few of them up. Charlotte says, hey, watching from the gym. That's wonderful. And Purvi tuning in from India. So thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. And, as always, I think this is just a conversation that is really important for us to have, talking about AI, talking about continued developments in technology within the immigration space, and this time short-term mobility. Wanted to give a quick thank you one more time to the main sponsor of this episode, DocketWise. And as I mentioned up top, DocketWise is an all-in-one immigration case management platform. They have immigration forms, customizable questionnaires in tons of different languages for your clients who may come from all over the world, integrations with all sorts of products and companies that you might use, from billing to compliance to email, you name it. Great customer service. They have a lot of great content, free content for the industry. They have a podcast that's on episode like 50 now at this point, and they have really good conversations there. They have an ebook on their website, a blog, CLEs. So check out DocketWise if you're in U.S. immigration, whether you do family-based, employment-based. Check them out. If you're if you're shopping for a case management system, perfect opportunity. But even if not, check out what they're doing. See what features they have, and have them in the back of your mind. So thank you to DocketWise for making the show possible and supporting it. Check out the link to DocketWise in the show notes. And for everybody who's listening or watching, stay safe. See you soon, probably in a couple of weeks, for the next episode of the GMI Rocket Show. And for now, have a wonderful weekend.